Hi, and welcome to another watch list, my weekly rundown of what I've been watching and what I've been up to. And this week, well, with 5 films for you to get your teeth into or for me to talk about. And 2 of them come from the One Indicator box set. Lovely Indicator sale, just finishing up about the time that this goes up. And it's the Hammer box set number 2 that's called Criminal Intent. Now this was talked about by my good friend Nathan Jones recently, and I'll put a link to his video so that you can check out his dive into the full box set. But I had 2 films left to watch in this set. First one being Never Take Sweets from a Stranger. Never Take Sweets from a Stranger is an interesting film to have made at the time. It's a bit dark in theme and a bit dark in presentation. This is set in Canada, but it could happen anywhere, because this is a story about paedophilia, really. It starts off with 2 young girls out playing in the field, and they're invited into a house by an older man who subsequently offers them some sweets in return for them dancing around naked. The parents find out about this, or the parents of one of the families find out about this, and decide to take action on this. This causes 2 problems. They're new to the society which they've just moved into, the husband being the new principal of the school. And the other side is, the man that they're accusing is one of those, well, he's the patriarch of a well-known family, basically the family that runs the town. And there's lots of things coming in here about whether it's right or whether it's wrong, whether they should do anything about it, isolated incident. But in the background there very much seems to be this idea that this isn't the first time, but nobody's done anything about it beforehand. And it makes for a really interesting study of what is very uncomfortable material, especially a court scene where the young actress Jean, who plays Jean, is subjected to some rigorous cross-examination. It's a really, really interesting take on what is some subject material that is probably a bit before its time to be explored in such depth and in such harrowing detail. Not that the film is graphic about how it does, but there are definitely some shots that the underlying themes and the underlying thoughts behind make it quite difficult to keep on top of. And as usual for Indicator, there are some great extras. There are retrospective documentaries put together with some people talking about what made it challenging and what made it work. There is some analysis of the filmmakers that are involved. I love the Women of Hammer series that they do, where they highlight the female protagonist that's in the film. But especially in this release, the booklet has pretty much the transcripts going back and forward between the filmmakers at Hammer and the BBFC, the classification, about the changes that they wanted to be seen made, some of the language that they didn't like within the script, and how that went backwards and forwards. It's one of the most revealing parts of the journey and the filmmaking journey that we don't get to see an awful lot of. And I think it's a great film and one you should definitely check out. Which brings me to the second film that I hadn't seen in that set, and that is The Full Treatment. Now, The Full Treatment is a film that a lot of people eschew as being, well, one that they don't really like, or that they're definitely the lesser out of the 4 that are in this set. And it starts with a car crash between a man and a woman who you've run into a lorry in the middle of the road. Jump forward some time, and the male and female, who are married, are trying to recuperate from this accident. The male especially seems to have some psychological trauma based on the accident itself, some memory blanks, and he's left with fits of rage in his personality every now and again. So they travel to the French Riviera for some relief from all of this and to try and rebuild the relationship. And while they're there, they come across some interesting characters in and out of their life, some old friends, some new people, and one of which happens to be a psychiatrist who offers to help with the husband with his problems. Now, it's a bit long drawn out, and obviously because it's a Hammer film, there's some twists and turns to be put in here. The motivations of all the characters are explored, and I'd say, if anything, the film just, it suffers from being about 20 minutes too long. it has what seems to be a 3-act structure, and then they have a coda at the end, and the coda is necessary to make sense of everything that happens before it. So really, it's a film that probably is the least of the 4 films that are in the set because of some filmmaking decisions, but I think there's something to be had in each single one of these, and even including the full treatment. I like some of the backwards and forwards dialogue that goes on between the two main characters, between the husband and wife. They bounce off each other very well. There's a bit of an unevenness in the writing in that they go from being very happy one second to being incredibly unhappy the next second to being rageful, all within the space of about 10 seconds, which seems a bit unbelievable or being stretched, but it's a film. You know, these are the kind of things in these kind of drama that you sometimes see. So that's the 2 films in the set. It's an absolutely terrific set. I think all 4 films are worth watching. Cash and Demand is probably the best film in the box set, but I may be so inspired by Nathan to do my own little review of the entire box set and display that for you going forward. Full of great extras, including, as I said before, the women of Hammer, and the female actress that's in this is one of the more famous actresses that you'll have seen and recognised from many other films over a similar time period, including some Oscar-worthy films. Third film up, well, I've been doing this kind of Sunday night Van Damme thing where I watch something that isn't quite, high quality as some other stuff, and I took a break from it. But I didn't go too far because I went for the Fearless Hyena, which is one of the Jackie Chan releases from '88 films. And Fearless Hyena was an interesting one to go for because it's Jackie Chan's directorial debut. And it tells the story of a young man who's quite immature, who's not quite ready for the ways of the world, who is being taught by his grandfather some illicit probably being the wrong words, but forbidden kung fu. This is after an opening of the film which sees an alternate kung fu master take down his father. And so you have this kind of hero's journey story set out as maybe somebody will seek revenge in the future. The plot's nothing new and extremely interesting, but what we have is a Jackie Chan kung fu movie and everything that goes with that. There's a good bunch of humour in it. I think it's plenty hilarious as it goes along. It always has this thing of the younger actor dressed up as an older actor, rather than getting an older actor to play because they still need to be nimble, etc. I always liked that about that time period. But what you do have is, it's almost like an episode of Strictly Come Dancing. Some of the choreography of the fight sequences or of the training sequences are almost balletic, and I think it's really, really interesting how they put some of this together and how they decide, okay, let's structure it like this rather than all-out action as it would be these days. It's very much a dance going along with props, some without props, but very much in keeping, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. It has the usual wonderful Kung Fu Bob artwork on these releases, which are nearly the reason to buy these things alone. The artwork in these is just utterly fabulous. But what you have is a great release and one you should definitely check out. Next up, the most challenging film of the week, I think, in terms of getting through it from start to finish and what the filmmaker was looking to achieve, is The World by Jia Zhangke. It's a Chinese filmmaker who had gained some notoriety outside of China before he made this film, which I think was 2004, and it was The World, and it was his first film that was state sponsored or state funded, and it tells the story of the workers within a Chinese theme park that is themed on the world, and it's a theme park which has various destinations in miniature form from around the world. You have Tower Bridge, you have Eiffel Tower, you have lots of places around the world represented here, but the story focuses very much on the people that are working there and the relationships that they have with each other and the complications in their life. I think one of the most underlying themes that's in this film is one of poverty. A lot of these people have not very much going for them other than the relationships of the people around them. And so some of the decisions that they make, or some of the people that they end up clinging to, are maybe not the best people for them, but if their circumstances had been better, they would maybe make different choices. And the film is shot in what almost seems for the first 20 minutes or so that it's a documentary. It's shot a lot in that kind of theme as we get a close-up look at their lives. Now, there are good things and bad things that happen to each person within the length of story, which is about 2 hours 20, and it can be quite slow moving for some parts. And in fact, some of the things that are shown to you are never truly spelt out to you, the implications. There are a group of Russian workers, female workers, that come in to work, and as they arrive, the man that's looking after them asks for their passports for his safekeeping, and they reluctantly give them up. It's hinted as to what happened to all of those girls as they go through, but you can probably guess where that goes itself. And what you have is a pretty beautifully made film that has some really great acting performances in the lead performances. A lot of characters that you'll not really like, some characters that you're not sure whether you like, and some that you just want to see a bit less of maybe. But it is an interesting study in imperfect people and actually how they relate to each other and how they go about their business. While the Eureka Masters of Cinema release is now out of print, which is the one that I watched, it's an absolutely stacked release if you can get your hands on it. It has some interviews, it has a documentary making of, and some behind the scenes as they went to promote the film as well. I don't know if I'd hardly recommend it. It's like a 3.5 star film for me because I think a lot of the characters are very unlikable, and you're only really rooting for one or two as it goes. And yeah, a tough film to speak about because it is one that I probably want to sit through again, but it's a bit too long for that. 140 minutes or so is maybe a bit long to maybe sit down and watch straight away again, but definitely one that I would like to delve more into, as well as see more of Janka's own films themselves. And here we are, we finish up with, well, I'm going to say it, my favourite Blu-ray release of the year, and one that was really quite unexpected. It's a Studio Canal release, so from their Vintage Classics, but the Vintage Classics range has maybe a reputation for doing more, old-fashioned films from the 50s and 60s, black and white, and here we have a film from 1985, Restless Natives, that is very much in the style of Bill Forsyth's films around that time as well. If you've seen Gregory's Girl or you've seen Local Hero, you have an idea of the kind of nature of the comedy that's in this film. You have an idea of the kind of themes that it's going for. But Restless Natives is the story of two young men. They don't have much going for them. They work in a joke shop and they decide to take the props out of the joke shop and use it to hold up tourist buses. They do so in two masks, one on a clown, one on a wolfman, in what is a very light-hearted nature comedy. They go about holding up these buses, how some people are, motivated to catch them, some less so, and then how the rest of the country, how the people around them kind of feel about the whole thing. Bernard Hill is the father of one of the young men, Will, and he just thinks, like a lot of fathers of young men, just think his son is just completely useless. Needs to get a good job, needs to settle down, useless, but yet he has such adulation when he reads about the two young men holding up the tourist buses in the paper. And while the two of them are sitting around the same dinner table, he eschews how wonderful these two young men are having such industry, while still at the same time looking at Will going, not like you useless little insert expletive. And really the crux of the film hangs in the two young men, Will and Ronnie, and the performances of the two of them together, because you'll find so much visual humour in here. You'll find so much comedic humour in the dialogue. You'll find a lot to resonate with if you were just kind of a kid that was a bit lost for a time or didn't really know what to be doing, but had a good heart at the end of it, which I think speaks to many people. Just like Local Hero, there is an American actor here, Burt Lancaster in Local Hero. In this one, it is Ned Beatty, who plays an FBI man who is on one of the buses that gets hijacked, and he sets about trying to catch these two young men. He plays a pretty good comic foil. He plays it very straight, but in many ways some of the jokes of a straight man can be just as effective as everything else around him. And again, just like Local Hero and Greggy's Girl, this wealth of Scottish actors just play the role and the background just absolutely perfectly. It's an absolute joy of a film. It's one that I just couldn't recommend hardly enough, especially if you get that kind of humour. And some of the themes that were about anti-government that were around the time, they're really in your face now. I'm sure they were even more in your face back then, as in mid-80s Britain. The kind of lower working class young man really didn't have an awful lot going for him, so it kind of goes very much with that at the time. As well as that, there are a couple of amazing extras on the disc. There's a pretty good retrospective documentary with a lot of the people that worked on it, the writer, and you know, they all talk about their experiences in both making the film, the impact that it had on them, and just while not together, all shot separately, you just get a feeling that of the family kind of feeling that it generates. There's also a little piece on Big Country, who did the music and did the soundtrack for the album, about how they had to be chased nearly all over the world to try and finally record it. And there's also a commentary with the producer, the director, and the writer, and he'd done it on it as well. And that was highly entertaining as well. Like I say, my favourite release of the year, without doubt, and one that I could not recommend highly enough, especially if you have a liking for that kind of dry British humour. So that's my watch list for the week. I have another one to record shortly because it's been a while since I recorded one of these. So I just have to keep on rattling on with doing this. But let me know what you've been watching, what you've been up to, and how you've been keeping. And I'll speak to you all again soon. Take care.